Hey, what's up? I'm Andrew Bacon, and today I want to show you how I made this awesome wall-mounted battery charging station. This project has been on my list for a long time, and now that my shop is moving, I'm so glad that I took the time to build it because I can literally pick it up off the wall, move it to the next shop, plug it in, and I can charge my batteries and have them all in one area. So I'd love to show you how I built this on this episode of Field Treasure Designs. Okay, here's my supplies. I've got a 4-inch long hinge, I've got a long power strip, then I've got a 1/2-inch sheet of plywood. I went with a 4 foot by 2 foot, then I've got two 1x4 by 8s. I figure my station is gonna be 4 foot tall by 2 feet wide, so I laid out all of my battery charging packs, just kind of a simulated outline to see where they would fit and where they would go, and I think that this is the right way. Now, I ended up changing my design from the way you see it here. But I knew that 4 feet tall by 2 feet wide was perfect. So I'm marking my lines and then I'm gonna grab my track saw and make the cut down the middle. What's great is I can grab my track saw and lay out this track here, which is meant for 4 foot long cuts, and it's perfect. Before I could clamp it, I needed to grab some scrap and put it underneath. Once you get it lined up, you just clamp down on both sides and you have a nice straight line to follow with your saw. There's a little bow in the wood which is causing the track to rise up, but that won't be a big deal once I run my saw across it and push it down. Now for a fun part, I get to use my plunge cut track saw, and so this is why I bought this, because it's so easy to use. You can plunge it into the wood like you see here and then run it along that track for a nice straight line, and then it hooks up to your dust collection and it really minimizes the sawdust, which is really cool. But you could totally use a circular saw if you don't have a track saw. Okay, done. Now I've got a back and a front. So I put them on top of each other just to test to see if they were flush, and I noticed that they were just a little bit off. So I grabbed my track saw, stacked them on top of each other, and made one more pass just to make sure that all the lines were nice and flush. Okay, now we're in business. The next step was to frame the inside of the cabinet. So I'm using those 1x4s and I'm lining them up to get exact measurements on how tall the wood is. Once I got both sides marked, I went over to my miter saw to make the cuts. In order to get the exact dimension for the bottom and top parts of the frame, I stacked the two long boards on one side in my hand there, and I'm measuring the distance from the edge to those two stacked boards together. Then I just transfer the line to the board and cut it on my miter saw. The dimensions were the exact same for the top and the bottom, so I was able to use the first cut as my exact measurement for the second cut. I then marked the middle so that I could cut them on my table saw exactly in half, so that one side could be the cabinet box mounted to the wall, and then the other side is the cabinet door that swings on the hinge. And so here I'm cutting them down in half to make two different frames. Next, I assembled the frames using some clamps, wood glue, and then I pre-drilled my holes as I decided to just go ahead and screw the screws right through the sides and into them instead of doing pocket holes. I'm not really sure why I decided that. I guess it was just the materials I had on hand at the time. I did a quick check to make sure I had my dimensions right, and then I started my glue up process. Once I got it all lined up, I grabbed my drill to drill pilot holes and then attached the screws in those holes to fasten this all together. After I assembled both boxes, I put them together just to make sure they were a good match. Then I brought them down to the floor to clamp them together. Then I grabbed my hinge and slid it into place. Now it's just a matter of screwing it in with the provided screws that it came with. I realized on the other side I needed another clamp, so I used this one to follow me along the line just to make sure I kept the cabinet secure with its door. After both sides were attached, I brought it back up to my workbench to test out the hinge. Yeah, nice. So far so good. Nice and smooth. My next step was to cut my two sets of French cleats I'm going to use to mount the cabinet. So I brought over my 1x4s and cut them to just under 2 feet length. Then I adjusted my table saw to a 45-degree angle so I could make the cuts down the middle of each side of the French cleat. So here I'm just cutting them down and I'm making 2 sets of French cleats. Here's what they look like laid out. I'm going to separate them, and the top sides are going to attach to my cabinet, and then they hang onto the bottom sides that will attach to the wall. I started with using my square just to make sure that my cleats were lined up perfectly with my cabinet. Then I use my wood glue to glue both sides because these need to be bonded really well because the whole cabinet is going to be hanging from these cleats. I then pre-drilled my holes and used 1-inch screws because I didn't want to go through that 1/2-inch plywood too far. Later, I'm going to turn it over and drive screws the other direction. Once the top was done, I just repeated the process for the bottom one. Then I opened the cabinet and attached some screws from the inside. Next, I laid out where I wanted my power strip to go, and as you can see, that cord is getting blocked by the cabinet frame. So I'm going to route out a little notch to allow that cord to sneak through so that that cabinet door can close flush. A quick test, and yes, it fits perfectly. Next, I mounted the power strip with the included screws and clips. It's really easy. You just find where you want them, screw them in, and the power strip clips right in there. A quick test to see if it fits, and nice and flush. Awesome. Now it's time to take this unorganized mess and turn it into an awesome battery charging station. So I grabbed all my battery chargers and packs and started laying them out to decide what my final arrangement would be. Once I had everything out, I then opened the cabinet and laid everything out again just to get a better idea of how this was going to go. And then the worst thing happened. I realized that, yeah, like you see there, the Makita battery charger is too thick, and so I couldn't close the cabinet door. I was like, oh no! But then I thought about it and realized, you know what? I can go ahead and do this battery station without a door on it. I can always add one later. So I went ahead and unscrewed the hinge and took off the door. After I got the door off, it was time to secure all the battery chargers. So I wanted to do it in such a way where I could remove the charging packs if I ever needed them. You know, you may have to go on site and do a job and take just one battery set with you. And so I wanted to make these removable, but also secure to hang on the wall. So each battery charging pack has a different configuration, so I had to make a custom setup for each one. Here on the Makita, as the largest one, I have it resting on the bottom of the frame there, and then I'm building 2 little risers that I'll screw in from the back. So after I traced the lines on where the holes need to go, I removed the battery pack and then I grabbed my drill to drill holes all the way through. This way, when I flip the cabinet over, I know right where the screws go. As you can see there, the holes are ready to go. First, I did some countersink holes just so that my screw heads would be flush. Then I picked up the piece with my left hand, I held it against the board on the inside while I screwed in the screws on the backside. Here's a shot of what it looks like in my left hand as I hold the piece while I'm screwing it together. After I was done, I laid it down and now I can attach the latches that I'm going to install on the top that will swivel. I made the latches out of scrap and I used cabinet screws because the head is a little bit bigger and they're just tight enough where they'll lock in place, but I can rotate them out if I want to lift the battery charger out of its place. Time for a quick test to see how this works out. So yeah, it sits right there, and then when I need to unlatch it, I can just rotate those latches around and pull the charger right out. Boom. Before I mounted the rest of my battery chargers, I wanted to have a good system for cable management. So I took a 3/4 inch piece of PVC and I cut a line down the middle of it with my table saw. Now you want to be really careful here so that the blade doesn't kick back on you, and use your push stick. And so the goal is to have a slit that runs all the way down the whole PVC section. Here's a good look of it after it's done. Then I took it over to my miter saw to cut little sections off of the PVC. Now you have to be careful because it can definitely break the pipe if you go too fast. Oh, just like that. So slow and steady, I just kept cutting a few off and good to go. Then once I was done, I had a bunch of little cord managers. And here's how I installed them. So wherever I wanted a cord to go, I placed the little PVC pipe, I drilled a hole with my drill, and then I was able to wedge in my driver to secure it with a little screw. How great is that? Then I take the cord and wrap it around as needed. What I love about this method is you can fit the cord in between that slit, but it's closed enough that it holds the cord attached. So then you just repeat the process wherever you want your cords to go. You can place a PVC cord keeper, I guess I should call it, wherever you need. So here the goal is to get the cord to where it would just have enough slack to be able to plug it into the power strip, which is pretty great. Then you don't have a lot of loose cords laying around. And boom, good to go. So next I went ahead and plugged in my batteries so that I could know exactly where I wanted my next charger to go. Depending on how big your batteries are, it might affect your layout. So anyways, this was the next charger, a DeWalt, and the good news was it had holes in it so you can mount it to a wall or surface. And so all I had to do was measure it and then screw in the screws to be able to hold it. So this was an easier one. And then I just did the same thing with the cord. I wrapped it around all the places I could find and left just enough to plug it in. My next charger was one of my Bosches, so I made this U that it could sit in, and then I'm going to attach that from behind. So I just did the same thing where I marked it on the top, then I drilled the pilot holes through it so I knew where to attach it from behind. After that was done, I slid it in place to mark and measure the height of the tab. And then, once I had that attached, all I had to do was secure the little rotating tab at the top. Okay, good to go. I just needed to make sure the battery could fit. Perfect. The tab doesn't interfere with it. My next charger was another Bosch, but this one's a wireless charger with a cool bracket on it, and it actually made it really easy. That blue case that surrounds the wireless charging platform comes off and it has holes in it. So once I knew exactly where I wanted to put the charger, it was easy to mount it. The next one was my Bosch 12 volt charger. I made more of a V to hold it in, and here I'm attaching the latch for the top. Perfect, another one down. Now I just need to wrangle the cords and I'll be on to the next one. My next one was a Ryobi charger, which is another one that has the holes in it, so it'll be easy to mount. But now I'm thinking about where I want to store my batteries, so deciding on the placement was important. Once it was secure, I wrapped the cords and then found out exactly where I wanted my little cord keeper, and then drilled one in and had a perfect place for it right there. Okay, here's what all the chargers look like on the board. Pretty good. Now all I have to do is add the shelves where I can store the batteries. I took some extra 1/2-inch plywood and the leftover 1x that I had cut down to assemble some shelves. So to put them together, I butted up another piece of wood behind it to get it flush. Then I took another strip of 1x to set it under the plywood to keep it level while I screwed it together. So first I did some pilot holes, then I attached them with fasteners. Now I've got a shelf I can attach to my station. Next, I just repeated the process for the rest of the shelves that I wanted to build. Okay, cool. I've got 3 identical shelves for one part of the station. To attach them, I did the exact same thing I had done with my battery charging holders. I just measured where I wanted them, drilled my pilot holes, then flipped up the cabinet and screwed them in with cabinet screws from behind. Okay, cool. One is done. A quick test with some batteries to see how they stack, and yes, this is perfect. So then I just repeated the process. And boom, done. So now I've got 3 shelves ready for some batteries. Before I added the next shelves, I wanted to make sure that I could hang it okay on the wall. So I grabbed my French cleats, found the studs, and anchored them to the wall. Then I grabbed my battery charging station to test it out. After that, I made some more shelves and mounted them. Then I hung up the cabinet and added my batteries, and I am so glad that I made this battery charging station. Hey, don't forget you can also make a door. Just make sure it's wide enough to fit around all of your devices. Hey, thanks so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful, and don't forget to subscribe and stay connected on all my future videos. I'll see you later.